The following is a Comfortably Zoned Radio Network production.
We are back, in case you're wondering, with George Case. George has a panel today. He's David Hubler. Hello, David.
Good morning. Good morning.
Good morning. Al Blumkin.
Good morning.
Good morning, Al.
Good afternoon.
And myself, Ralph Tyko, with the Comfortably
Technically afternoon here right now.
Pardon me?
It's technically afternoon here right now.
That's true, but it's technically morning where I am, so got to go first person sometimes. George is here. Hello, George Case.
Hello, everybody.
Good. We're talking off the air a little bit. I'm the only Californian at the moment, and you guys are all Easterners suffering from winter-like storms in the summertime. Sorry you're going through this bad weather. Cleared up today, though, right?
Well, it did here in Philly. You know, I'm sure they're going to be playing ball because it's really nice now. But you know, as David mentioned and Alan, I mean, last night was pretty bad, and there were some cancellations of ball games, which happens in the summertime. But you know, today it's turned out to be good baseball weather.
Yeah, there's supposed to be storms coming in this evening or tomorrow, but not the same kind, not the severity of what happened on Saturday.
Yeah, well, you know, whenever they have, if you've been a ball player, whenever there's lightning, I mean, it's a little bit scary because you're standing out there on the field, you know, you're a target, and you know, they use the discretion to either cancel games or delay them until the lightning. You know, if it's a rain delay, that's one thing, but if it's lightning and bad storms, that's really dangerous to everybody.
Well, it's even worse on a golf course, you know, because lots of times on golf courses, you're not that close to the shelter of a dugout or you know, so.
Yeah, I think they blow a horn or something, try to get them off the course. Because like you're saying, David, it can be a distance from, you know, from safety. So
and also there are no trees on a ball field, thank goodness. But there are on golf courses.
Yeah, there sure are. And I think it was a few years ago, you know, Lee Trevino was actually struck by lightning. And you know, there's a major golfer, and he's out there, and, you know, the lightning has no choice where it's going to hit. It'll hit whatever is standing or the tallest area. So, you know, you really need to get off a course. And in baseball, they do. They try to get the players off the field, you know, into the clubhouse or whatever, and then if you're in the stands, you know, they try to move them back away. If they're, you know, outside, they try to move them back underneath the, you know, part of the stadium to give them some protection.
Now, most of the time, the fans run back on their own. I was in the last game where that happened, and man, we all took. It was really a bad storm too, and we all took off at the back end, you know, where the concessions are.
Yeah, they've even canceled and postponed some football games, which, you know, football they play in all kinds of weather, but if there is lightning, you know, that creates you know, a real hazard. So that they've you know, often canceled games or delayed them until the storms, especially out in the west or someplace where they can see them coming. You know, they don't want players subjected or fans subjected to that.
Yeah, my alma mater Pitt had a game out in Stillwater, Oklahoma, a couple of years ago against Oklahoma State. That was delayed for about 45 minutes because of lightning.
Right.
It was in the middle that they had to stop play and then resume. Yeah.
Right.
Do you guys remember in the old days when the players would take the button off the top of their caps? There was metal in the button. I don't know if there still is in caps, but I think so.
I don't think there are any buttons at all now.
No, there are buttons, but
they're not. The ones I have no buttons at all, and they're all, you know, the MLB caps. They don't need to do that anymore. The way they manufacture them.
I didn't know that. I thought all caps still had buttons, but
or vice versa.
I also wanted to make note of in these new stadiums, the drainage is incredible compared to the way it used to be. And sometimes you'll have a major rainstorm and they'll take off the tarp and play anyway after it stops. So.
There was a story a long time ago. I remember hearing my dad talk about it. I think, matter of fact, I think Joe Cronin, after he went to Boston, and he was Clark Griffith's son-in-law, he called a forfeit and didn't call it. He appealed to the umpires to forfeit a game against Washington at Griffith Stadium because of the drainage problems. The field was like a swamp. And, and so Cronin, protested the game, and I think they upheld it, because the groundskeepers couldn't get the tarp on the field fast enough or something. And it was one of those things that the Griffith Stadium certainly didn't have the drainage that the new ballparks have.
Well, I know up until game time, it's Major League Baseball's decision. And once the game starts, it's the umpire's decision whether or not to keep it going.
Right. But today there's such an emphasis on getting the fans into the stadium and selling them all sorts of goods that they delay calling games for quite some time now. Maybe 3-4 hours will pass before it's terrible.
Pirates of Cincinnati was delayed 3 hours Friday night.
Yeah, and they're night games, so they're starting at 8 o'clock, and by 11 o'clock they still haven't started, and yet they don't call the game, which is absurd, especially on a weekday night. People can't sit there till 2 or 3 o'clock in the morning. If it goes into extra innings like that,
I don't care as long as the game is official.
I always had a game in Washington where they actually went for 15, 16 innings, and we left about the 12th or 13th because we had to be at work the next morning. But that's different. It's not the same thing as keeping fans in the stands just so that they can have the opportunity to buy more stuff and for the coffers to be increased for the ownership.
Well, as long as they don't have to ask you a rain check, they don't care.
Right. Absolutely. There's almost no such thing as a rain check anymore.
I know, yeah.
It's an obsolete term.
And no double headers. Single admission.
I haven't seen a major league a ticket recently, but in the old days, the rain check was always on that ticket.
Right.
And if the game was called, they would, the ushers or whatever would tear off the rain check, give it to the customer, and then he, could use it for a future game.
Mm-hmm. Right. Well, now you don't even get those tickets.
I think as you went in, they would tear off the ticket.
Yeah, whatever it was. I just remember seeing the tickets had the rain check.
You hold on to
the rain check on it. Right.
Mm-hmm.
Yep.
Yeah. But also they, as far as the tickets are concerned, most people get their tickets online now, and it's printed out on that printer, and it doesn't look anything like the old ducats, with the pasteboard kind of construction. And
right.
I don't think that comes with a rain check on it at all.
No. But they would know, the computers would know which games are called.
Oh, yeah. But the other way, I've seen people go in, and I don't do this, but I've seen people go in and they hold their cell phone up, and it's scanned by one of the ticket takers, and so that there's no ticket at all. There's nothing in paper to hand to the usher or the guard. You just show them the page on your cell phone that has your ticket.
Hey, imagine you're on your way up, you're in line to get into the ballpark, and all of a sudden you lose juice on your cell phone.
Right, yes. Or worse, you lose the cell phone.
Right?
Well, I'm an old guy. I don't have to worry about that.
You don't have cell phones, George?
Hey, I remember the old days. I've told people. I said I've been fortunate because I never bought a ticket. I always had, either my dad was able to get tickets or players would leave them at will call for me or whatever. So I never had to buy a ticket. I wouldn't know what to do. But I had a cell phone. But obviously, it's a different world today when you have tickets using your cell phone or online. Mm-hmm. Rather than the old days when you had to walk up and actually buy a ticket, at the gate. That's a different world. I'm not sure that world even maybe they still do it at Fenway and Wrigley, but with the other ballparks, I don't know how they do that anymore.
No, I wouldn't think so. They also have another gimmick nowadays. There's a processing fee that is tacked on to the face value of the ticket from Ticketron or any of these big organizations that sell tickets. And I can remember going, even if you went up to the gate at the front of the stadium and you went to buy a ticket right there, they would charge you this processing fee.
Wow.
About $3.50 a ticket.
I'll tell you what burns me is that if a team that's really good in the standings or popular, for instance, out here in Oakland, if the Yankees are in or the Red Sox are in, they draw many more people. They charge more for a ticket.
Yes. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
It's a floating thing determined by God knows who. And
well, they obviously need the money, Ralph.
Yeah, they do.
Yeah.
Got to give them that. I was going to throw a benefit, but
the A's had 56,000 last night because they opened up the upper deck.
They did. The Giants came in for the weekend interleague series, and they drew more last night than they ever have drawn, or since 2004, or something like that. And believe me, they have a good young team, and they just got Familia from the Mets to help their bullpen along the way. It'd be amazing if they were contenders at the end, but they're like 13, 14 games over 500, and you never know. Okay, guys, I want to go around the horn, starting with Al Blumkin, to talk about your general impressions, anything that comes to mind about the first half of the 2018 season.
What's amazing is that in the American League especially, there are 5 teams, the A's may make it 6, that are locked in for postseason. The Yankees, the Red Sox, the Indians, the Astros, the Mariners, and maybe the A's. The rest of them are very mediocre to bad. And in the National League, you've got a whole bunch of teams that are still can make it. The other thing, of course, is that in most places attendance is down this year.
Considerably, yeah.
Yeah, and because people, a lot of people are fed up having to pay a lot of money to see teams that stink or are very mediocre. It boils down to that. And MLB basically is controlled by television, and then the Yankees and Mets are playing at 8 o'clock tonight because ESPN has grabbed the game. And 8 o'clock on a Sunday night here is not a good time to start the games. They don't allow for any flexibility. They want the game, they grab it. And MLB is basically, they let television, because the money that's coming in from them is so huge that they let them dictate the starting times and commercial breaks and all the rest of it. That league games to go to 3.5 hours. And of course, as we've discussed several times before, the game and the All-Star game, which I didn't watch, was another, was an example of what the game has become. Strikeouts, walks, and home runs. The All-Star game had 10 home runs and 25 strikeouts.
Al, as far as players are concerned, different teams, anybody or any team impress you right off the top or disappoint you off the top?
I guess the biggest disappointment so far in the majors is Washington. I'm sure David will, second that.
Yeah, good time for David to jump in here. What is your impression of Washington? Can they turn it around?
That's a good question, and I agree with Al. It's been very disappointing. They started out like a house fire. There wasn't that much foreseen competition, although Philadelphia and Atlanta have certainly jumped out up on top, and the Nats are having trouble. The Nats are having trouble beating just about anybody these days, including the Mets. So I don't know. I mean, Strasburg is back, and they keep talking about making a couple of trades, but they're not doing anything. And I think that's been the biggest disappointment here, of course, locally. As far as the first half of the season, and you talk about ticket prices and probably one of the biggest disappointments is just about 40 miles north of here in Baltimore, where the Orioles can't seem to win a game. I mean, they're just awful. They're probably the worst team in baseball. I think their record shows that they are. And interestingly enough, I am sure, now I haven't been to the game, but I'm sure that I was watching the Yankee-Orioles games, and there was no one in the stands. It used to be you really had to get a scalper to get tickets for a Yankees-Orioles game. Now, if they're charging a premium because it's the Yankees, fewer people still will be going to the game. One, because they figure the Yankees are going to win it, and two, they don't want to watch a terrible Orioles team. So the Angelos and company are in a bit of a bind. I think they've already dumped Manny Machado for a couple of prospects. So I think that, and they're probably talking about getting rid of one of the frontline pitchers as well. So it's kind of pathetic. I was watching even the other night that there was no one in the ballpark. This is a ballpark that prides itself on being, the standard of the new stadiums in baseball, and no one's going.
Yeah.
David, I want to just make a comment about that. I agree with you about that. Number one, Washington, definitely a disappointment. But the Orioles, I just looked, I think it was last night. Here we are midway through the season, and I think the Orioles are something like 40 games out of first place.
That's right. Yep.
I mean, that's crazy. I mean, you talk about a bad team, and they got to be horrible. I mean, to be midway through the season and 40 games out. It's just absurd. And you're talking about Camden Yards. I mean, Camden Yards was always held, as the wonderful new retro park and, drew good crowds. I mean, now, like you're saying, it's virtually empty.
Yes. Yeah, it really is. And it doesn't look to get much better because from what I read, their farm system isn't very good at all. Angelos is pretty cheap when it comes down to it. He doesn't want to spend much money, and that's been their problem. Look, they didn't do anything over the winter. They didn't go after anybody to bolster the team. They stood pat, and they waited for the season to open. And they're pushing toward the Mets record of 40 and what was that record? 40 and
120. They lost 120 games in 1960.
Yeah, and the difference is that these guys are in their prime. The Mets 62 team were a bunch of older guys, some of them who had great careers, but they were well past it, and they were taken from a list that each of the other teams, provided. Here are the guys you could take from us, and you would expect them not to be very good. But the Orioles have a nucleus of young guys that they're just not doing anything.
Kansas City is the same boat. They're as bad as the Orioles, and they're not throwing flies either.
Yeah, but they're not doing as badly. The Orioles
they're as bad as the Orioles. They are.
Well, actually, no one is as bad as the Mets this year. So,
so we have three terrible teams.
Both those teams are worse than the Mets.
But Ralph, what you had asked about earlier, the biggest surprise of the first half of the season. To me, the biggest surprise is how many teams. The teams that were mentioned as being up there in the top. You would expect them to be up there in the top, but so many teams are just out of it already. I mean, just totally out of it. That's a bit unusual. I think that's what surprised me so much.
Well, let me just take a second to give Bud Selig, and this is a surprise, a little kudos, because after all, if they were going to expand to 30 teams, it's good that it's more than one or two races going on at the same time. So you've got, at least for all the teams that are out of it, you've got a bunch of teams that are in it, like you guys mentioned about the American League. Al was mentioning there are 5 or 6 teams in contention for the wild card. And at first we thought it was going to be watered down. The playoffs are going to be this, that, and the other thing, and not as important. Give him credit. They had to have some sort of system to make it interesting for the majority of fans in the country, so they don't lose interest.
But look how many teams have lost it. The fans have lost interest. Because by being so bad.
That's true. Speaking of not being bad anymore, but not really being good anymore, can you talk to the Pirates, Al Blumkin?
Yeah, they're on an 8-game winning streak right now.
Yeah. So they should be 5 games over 500, am I correct?
1 game over 500. They were 7 games under a week and a half ago, and they beat Washington in the last game, and they swept 5 from the Brewers, and they beaten the Reds last night and Friday night. So they're on an 8-game winning streak. They're 1 game over 500. They're a game behind the Cardinals, and all of a sudden there's a very chance that they may be going from sellers to possibly buyers. The stretch right now.
I was going to ask you whether or not
everything has come together for them over the last week and a half. I mean, as unbelievable it sounds, because me or any of the other Pirate fans I'm in touch with, nobody foresaw this.
Right. So it's a pleasant surprise.
Very pleasant surprise. They're still not drawing because people are still furious that they traded
their recent success to is their pitching staff coming together. What is it that makes them formidable, whereas they weren't?
Well, players that were underperforming most of the season are performing now, and they're getting fairly solid starting pitching for a change. Okay. These are both absolute weaknesses that nobody follows this team would expected anything to change, but they've won 8 in a row, and they're 1 game over now, and they're not that far back in striking distance of the Cubs and the Brewers, but I don't think realistically, I don't think they have a shot at that, but you never know.
Okay. How about Philadelphia, George Case? They too are playing much better than anybody thought they would at the beginning of the year.
Yeah, the Phillies have had a good year so far, no question. They're in a pretty good pennant race with the Braves, and the Phillies, have a lot of young players, and they had some criticism early in the year because the managers making moves, not experienced, but everything seems to be coming together for them right now, and they've got, I think, a half-game lead over Atlanta, so they're having a pretty good year and drawing well, and as opposed to some other teams that we're talking about that are really down the toilet. The Phillies are, doing quite well after many years, and I used to be critical of their marketing efforts. They're doing a good job marketing too. They're doing a lot of, commercials. They're doing a lot of player interviews and trying to get fans really interested, and I think the product on the field has certainly done good justice to their efforts with their farm system to bring up a lot of good young players.
Okay, before I ask David Hubler about the race between Boston and the Yankees, I want to ask both you, Al Blumkin, and George Case about the respective ballparks in Pittsburgh and Philadelphia. Were they considered to be a success, a disappointment?
Oh, yeah, Pittsburgh a success, yeah. very much. It's a beautiful ballpark. It's just too bad that, since it opened in 2001, there haven't been very many good teams to, occupy it. And Pittsburgh is a town that, will not show up to watch losers.
Right. How about Philadelphia? Now, Philadelphia fans have been known to be. Why don't you dispel some of that about Philadelphia fans?
Well, they do get a bad rap. I think maybe it's more with football, than it is with baseball. But they're very discerning fans. But in my opinion, and I've seen both. I've seen actually three: Shibe Park, Veterans Stadium, and now CB Park. CB Park is a very nice park, well thought out. They reduced the size, which I think is now around 45,000, which is good for baseball because they were, in the old days, they would play in a place like Veterans Stadium that held 65, 70,000 people. They'd have 30,000 people in attendance and it'd be half full. So, CB Park is in the same area where the new Eagle Stadium, Lincoln Financial Field is, as well as the Flyers play. Wells Fargo Arena. So they've done a good job in Philadelphia. I can't say anything derogatory about the ballpark. I happen to think it's a very nice park, and it is modern, but they did reduce the size of the park, which a lot of the major league stadiums have done, which I think is a wise move, because they were playing in a lot of those, 1970s park, the cookie-cutter parks, which were really made for football. They weren't really good for baseball. And, they were just too big. So you have the smaller size stadiums and, the fans, they get behind a team. And a team like Philadelphia, is drawing well as compared to what we talked about before with the Orioles, which had a, wonderful park, but the product on the field is terrible.
Hey, I just learned something about George Case. You are an optimist. Because when you describe the field, when you describe the stands as being half full, you didn't describe them as being half empty.
Well, I guess you're right about that, Ralph. It could be either way, but I am an optimist. But I just know when I'd watch ball games, and when I was playing and that kind of thing, a player would rather look up in the stands and see half full, as opposed to half empty. I mean, you don't like playing with a lot of empty seats. And it used to be a joke was that, they would disguise the crowd as empty seats because that's the way they were. I mean, I've heard that many times. And, football didn't have that problem. Maybe they will now, but baseball always had that problem, especially if a team was out of it early. They would be, not drawing flies, and that would be difficult. As David points out with Baltimore, there's an example. Who's going to go and watch the Orioles pay that kind of money when they're 40 games out at midseason? I mean, it's just not going to happen.
Right. Do you think they got enough from Machado, given everything?
Well, he's a talent, no question. I know the Phillies were hoping that he was going to, they would be able to land him, but, that didn't happen. But, he's who knows? I mean, those kind of trades, you wonder because sometimes they turn out, sometimes they don't. I mean, sometimes it can be a real bust.
But now he's a rental.
Hey, he's a great player, no question.
He's a rental, though.
He is right. He is in the last year, so you're right about that, Alan. I mean, next year all of a sudden he goes to the highest bidder, so he is what they call a rental player. They get him for the last year on his contract.
But sometimes a player will come into a city as a rental, and he'll fall in love with the city, he'll fall in love with the team. That could happen with the Dodgers, and they could end up making room for him and signing him. More likely not. More likely he is a rental. Their shortstop is hurt for the year. He's great, Seagram. So we'll see. David Hubler, we have a race going on in the East between the Red Sox, and it could be other teams might come in there. Tampa Bay, as our friend Peter Golenbach, Al Blumkin will attest. Peter's very high on this young Tampa Bay.
He's 20 games out.
Yeah, he is high on it. I've seen him on Facebook posting about the team. But as Al says, yeah, they're 20 games out right now. This two-team race was to be expected, especially after the way the Yankees turned it around last year. The problem is that the Yankees pitching doesn't match up to the Red Sox. I hate to say it, but it's true. The Red Sox have better pitching. On the field, Mookie Betts is a standout player, but the Yankees have several standout players themselves. The difference will come down to pitching, especially if it turns out that the Yankees have to play a one-game play-in.
Right.
They don't have
third wild card or whatever it is.
Yeah. Well, if they finish second in the division, they'll have to make the one-game playoff. They can win it. They did it last year. But the question is, how far can you go when you don't have pitching? Every manager I've ever read about or seen will always tell you going into the playoffs, it's the pitching. Good pitching beats good hitting. And that's a general rule of the game, and it hasn't changed in 100 years.
Well, if they wind up with the wild card, the first wild card, and they win the playing game, they'll get either the Red Sox or the Astros.
Well, that's what I mean, and that's exactly what happened last year. Last year they got Cleveland, and they happened to beat Cleveland. They couldn't hold up against the Astros, but it took them, 7 games, 6 games, 7 games to lose it all. So they played well once they got in there. But I'm still waiting for them to make some kind of move on the pitching side, although there aren't that many really good pitchers left. Sonny Gray has pitched well the last 2 games, but he is definitely an enigma. You never know what you're going to get with him.
German ship to the minors after that horrible start Friday.
Yeah, I know. That was look, who had a terrible start last night in the 9th inning? Their star closer. He was awful, just awful. Never saw him pitch as badly as that, but he had a big layoff.
You're talking Chapman.
Yeah. Chapman, yeah. He pitched the 5 batters, didn't get any one of them out, and gave up 2 more runs. So anyway, it's going to be interesting. The Yankees and the Red Sox still play a good number of games against one another, so we shall see. If the Yankees make a pitching move, I think that bolsters their chances. We'll see.
Okay. When you mentioned, Al Blumkin, that the Pirates may be buyers, which is like the A's being buyers.
It's very unlikely because if they are competitive, they'll probably go with what they have. They're not known for spending money.
Okay, but if they did have to make one little addition that may not cost them a lot, what do you think needs shoring up the most?
I think what needs shoring up the most is the middle infield.
Okay.
But as I said, they're not buyers. They might pay, trade one of their lesser players for a rental if it comes to that, but they're not going to spend any big money. It's not what they do.
Okay. How's their farm system in case they have...
Farm system isn't bad. It's not great, but it isn't bad.
Pardon me? Say again, Al.
It's not great, but it's not terrible either.
Okay.
It's middle of the road.
Okay. David Hubler, any pitcher out there that is rumored? There's not much out there. I understood that Arrieta might have been is it Arrieta with Texas that might be available? Is that a possibility?
Who knows? I know that there's been talk about Happ coming down from Toronto, but again, it's a package deal. The teams that want to dig into the Yankees farm system, a lot of them don't have enough to offer to make it worthwhile. If the Yankees get into the playoffs, well, to the true Yankee fan like myself and the ownership, it's not a successful season unless you win the World Series. But they don't really want to give away the farm either. Certainly not for a rental player like the Orioles did with Machado. The Yankees could still come back and sign him at the end of the year, but I don't know why they want to do that. He insists he's going to play shortstop, and the Yankees have a great young rookie shortstop. So we'll see, but I don't know if any. That's the problem. There aren't many really good pitchers out there for them to trade, and the only one I haven't seen mentioned with any sincerity is this Happ deal, and that's within the same division. So we shall see.
I'll ask Al Blumkin this one because he's the realist. Any chance the Mets and the Yankees would deal with each other?
No.
Under any circumstances?
No, the French players only. I don't think there's any chance of DeGrom or Syndergaard being traded to the Yankees.
Okay. And I'll ask you this one final question about the Mets. Do you think they'll keep the pitching staff, not just DeGrom and Syndergaard? You got Matz and Wheeler.
Who knows with them? I can't answer that. Who knows with them?
Okay.
No, they're so screwed up right now, they don't know which end is up.
With their three-headed leadership.
Yeah.
One
and
of the things
Wilpine, Jesse won't spend money. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, anything any of you guys want to add to this terrific conversation? This has been very informative.
Well, I would like this, George. I would like to add one thing, Ralph, while we're talking. Alan briefly mentioned it, but we're midway through the season. We just finished the All-Star game. I happen to used to love to watch All-Star games. I thought they were great. When in the earlier time, when who was the better league, the American League, National League, it really was a tremendous amount of interest. Today, I think it's become a made-for-television event. I mean, I was watching it, and I was shocked to see players playing in the game that are mic'd up, and
yes,
talking to the announcers. I'm looking at this and saying, what the hell is going on? What's happened to baseball? When you played the game, you're out there, you're concentrating, you're trying to play, you're trying to think about it, and here's guys standing in the outfield or in the infield or whatever with a earpiece talking to the guys in the booth. I mean, to me, that was absolutely absurd. I did not like it, and I would just like to hear some other people if it affected them the way it did. I mean, I've said before, I'm an old timer, but I remember when the game really meant something. And today, I'm looking at the All-Star game. I said, this is like Entertainment Tonight. I didn't like it, and anybody else have an opinion? Because that was my opinion.
Excuse me. The last time I watched one was in 1981 when they came back from the strike.
Well,
I dropped out a long time ago. Because
I agree with Alex. I didn't. I watched just about two innings of it.
Yeah.
And it's a circus. And I'm sure that the players felt the same way you did, George, about being mic'd. I don't think they wanted it. I don't think they liked it. But it's probably in their contract that whatever MLB says they have to do, they do. And it was insane. I think part of the reason it was done is because they took away the much criticized reason for playing the game was to give one league the home field advantage in the World Series, which was also an awful idea.
Right.
And that was terrible.
Yeah, everyone agreed that was a terrible idea, so they had to come up with something new. Interestingly enough, I first thought the game was on, I forget what network, and I tuned it in.
MLB.
I know what it was on, but that's not what I tuned in. When I first tuned in, I think it was maybe Fox.
Yeah.
And they were playing some sort of ridiculous red carpet treatment of the ball players coming into the stadium, which was like hours before the game. And I thought, oh, well, maybe the game is being delayed or something. No, when I flipped over, the game was already in the second inning. So it was absurd. I think the whole thing is a circus. I don't like the home run derby. I don't like all the nonsense that goes on the field. I do like the players coming out with a little kid, little leaguer. I like that a lot. I think that's a great idea. But I don't like much else.
Another little thing is that this absurd rule that you have to have at least one player from every team. When there was 8 teams in the league, that was doable. Now forget it. Why should anybody on the Royals or the Orioles participate in a game like this?
Let me add something. I too hate the fact that the player's concentration during the game is disturbed. Like, how's a player, like they interviewed a middle infielder, Lindor. Now, there's so much to do for an infielder between pitches if the game is played right. What's the next pitch going to be? Who's going to cover second base? This, that, and the other thing. Now, this guy is smiling into the microphone and trying to keep up with the witty repertoire of the announcers. Couldn't possibly be paying homage to the game at that point, the game he's in. But you know what? I got to see him a little bit because Cleveland guy, I'm living out here, you don't see him. Got to know him a little bit through those interviews and really got to like the kind of his spirit and what have you. Even though it's a weird way to be exposed to him, and there should be a much better way of for the fan to get to know the players, I picked up on him a little bit. I was very impressed by his, I don't know if it's his smile, if it's his approach to the game, but I like him, Lindor. So the All-Star game.
Ralph, I don't disagree with your comments about that. I mean, I think that you do see an insight, but my opinion is just that as a former player, and when you talk to former players, they're out there to win. They're out there to play. Now, all of a sudden, you're in an exhibition, and, who gives a damn? I mean, they're laughing, carrying on. It just doesn't have the same meaning. And I hope, my opinion, I hope it doesn't set a precedent for starting to do this kind of stuff. Other than just, all of a sudden you're in other games and you got players being mic'd up on the field. I just don't like it. Personally, I think it detracts from a player's concentration on what he's out there on the field and what he's supposed to be doing.
Wait till they try to mic the pitcher. Then you'll see.
Yeah, right.
Yeah.
Well, here comes my curveball. Get ready for it.
Watch this. I can really spin this one down.
Yeah.
And you wonder if teams have technology to intercept what these.
No, just watch it on the screen downstairs in the locker room, the clubhouse.
Right?
Yeah. No, I think
they don't need somebody sitting out like they did at the Polo Grounds with binoculars looking.
Yeah, sitting up in that elevated locker room there, clubhouse.
Now, I want to ask a trivia question of Al Blumkin. Who was the player, utility infielder that played very little, that until that sign stealing thing came up?
Hank Shins.
Until that article in the Wall Street
Hank
Journal
Shins.
and the book. Oh, Al, you are unbelievable.
Yeah.
You are. What was his name again?
Hank Shins. SCHENZ.
And he comes back from the war with a high-powered telescope in those days. And he brings it into the clubhouse for one reason or another, and a bell goes off in Leo DeRocher's head. And the Giants, in the latter part of the 51 season, just blatantly stole signs from the center field bleachers. They had a buzzer system set up. During the game, they had, who's the old Dodger coach? I can't think of his name. Later managed the Giants for a little while under DeRocher. He was manning the telescope, sending with a buzzer signal. Sal Evars in the bullpen would pass the information on with another buzzer, and they knew what pitches were coming. Now, does it help to know? Yes, but some players didn't want to know what was coming. Bobby Thompson wasn't one of those. Bobby Thompson knew the pitch that was coming. The problem is, people will say, and first of all, sign stealing was legal at that time, but you still got to hit the ball. You got to know what the pitch is coming, notwithstanding, you still got to make a connection with the ball. And I read that book, and it took a lot of the wind out of the sails of an old New York Giant fan for a while. And then I realized they weren't the only teams that were stealing signs. I remember there was a big thing with your Pirates, Al, in the late 50s, stealing signs. The Braves had a thing going. They were stealing signs. So it was part of it. But that you knew Hank Shantz's name, you ought to be commended, of course.
Thank you.
All-time SABR trivia champion. How many of those contests did you win over?
Well, I won 7 times. I won 5 times on a team and twice individually. I retired after my second individual, and those days, now you can play them both. When I was playing, you weren't allowed to. So.
Okay.
So now you're an old-timer.
I'm an old-timer, yes. I'll tell you.
Well, I had been, as some of you know, I had been the executive director of SABR, and I can tell you that Alan Blumkin, his name was legendary amongst the SABR insiders with regard
I'll tell you a little story.
His knowledge.
The guys who do the trivia nationally, they have a Facebook site, and they put up a question the other day. Who was the first clue was he has the all-time record for Orioles RBIs in the season, so I put down Jim Gentile. And my friend Tom Zacco put a like on it. Then it comes out it was Miguel Tejada in 2007. So I put down to Tom, I said, now you know why I can't compete anymore.
Right.
2007.
Can't catch up with that fastball, right?
You really
can't catch up. Yeah, you can't catch up with that fastball.
So,
Well, if you guys in any way consider yourselves over the hill, know this. I never had a hill to be over in my life. So,
people ask me, I said I had my run. It was a great run. I'm not willing to go up there and, tarnish it. So.
You suffered from total recall, I guess.
Yeah, too much, at times. Yeah.
Well, sometimes total recall in life, there are things you don't want to recall.
Absolutely.
It's better to have a selective and a short memory. If you could have both of those.
There's this actress, Mary Lou Henner, who was on Taxi.
Oh, yes.
Yeah, she supposedly she has a memory. She can remember. You could give her a date, 40 years ago, and she can remember what she ate, what she had on, and all this kind of stuff. I mean,
yeah, there are several people that have that.
That's scary as hell.
It is scary. I mean, but I don't think they dwell on it. I think it's only when it's called up. It's almost like going into a vault and pulling out something when you need it. I don't know. Because I saw her do that on TV with several other people who also had. It's almost like an idiot savant kind of.
Yeah. But that's scary as hell.
It is scary. Yes, it is.
All right, guys. Thank you very much. Good show as usual. George Case, Al Blumkin, and David Hubler.
Okay. Thank you, guys.
My privilege.
See you Tuesday. Bye-bye.
Company. I enjoy learning from you guys. And we'll do it again next week. Same bat station as Al Blumkin.
Same bat time, same bat channel.
Beautiful.
Okay.
Right.
Bye-bye.
Okay. See you then.
Thank you,
Bye.
guys.
Bye-bye, everybody.
Thanks for listening, everybody.